and I'm Marva Richardson once again, and I am so delighted to be back with you. Today we are talking about the one and only Mr. Butch, Ronald Butch Lewis. And I don't want to talk about my part in knowing he and Savannah until maybe a couple of minutes after the show. I want to give the others that are here, our guest, our co-host, time to really, you know, talk themselves and to get in what Mr. Lewis was all about. I would also like to say to you, thank you, Savannah, for giving me the permission to bring this program on. I talked with her a while back, and I would not have wanted to do this without her permission. So again, to the family, thank you so much, and our condolences go out to you once again. With that being said, Jackie Wright is with us, Shauna Roy, and Mr. Linwood, and Mr. Linwood Jackson. These people are going to enlighten you on the life and you knowing him. Yeah, he knows him a lot more in areas that we didn't. So we're going to give them a chance to talk about Mr. Butch Lewis. Jackie.
Thank you, Marva. I'm Jackie Wright, and to God be the glory. When Marva told me of her plans today to honor Butch Lewis, I was so happy that you had decided to do this. Those of you that know me know that occasionally I do mention Butch because Butch has been such a major part of Wilmington and the national scene as far as a lot of his contributions that have been made. And I told Marvel I felt a little uncomfortable about talking about it a lot because with Butch, those of you that know Butch know that he was a little private on his giving. And I certainly understand Marva why he was. Because once you get into donating and giving a lot to the communities and internationally, and I say that because of his commitment to Nelson Mandela and his commitment to Africa. And his commitment to Morehouse College. A lot of organizations will start sending you letters, Shauna, you know, and they'll put out the plea. Certainly, I'm told that a lot of that is happening now. Butch has a foundation, and if you have a letter of need that you would like to submit, it really needs to go not to the family members, but to Butch's foundation up in New York. Marva Butch, to me, he enabled me to be, I will say, a free thinker and a person who could certainly afford to speak their own mind. And you know, with a lot of folks, they want to sugarcoat a lot of the gospel. Butch wasn't about that. I mean, he told you exactly what he was thinking as he thought it, whether you liked it or not. And he was a powerhouse in this community. He had a love for God and a love for children. And with his upbringing, with being raised by his grandmother coming out of Philly and Chester, some of those tough areas, he was a tough guy to get to know. And he had this outer toughness, but inside he was really a lovable, cool, neat, sincere, and feeling person, Shana.
Well, I actually never had the honor and privilege of meeting Mr. Lewis. I'm just here, Marva, to support you and to learn more about him, and actually to see what I can do, if anything the upper room can do to support the foundation.
Yes. I really think because with you being here, it gives me my support. I was telling Mr. Roy, I called him, you know, I said, well, I'll be all right, because sometimes some of these programs, the people need to hear concrete things. They don't need to hear a lot of babble. And a lot of times when I'm excited, I can be overwhelming. When I get nervous, I can talk too much. And I know that about me. I have enough to know that I'm talking too much. So when I have people such as yourself with me, I'm comforted knowing it's going to go well. I would like to say before we bring Mr. Linwood on, I had the privilege and the honor of being the housekeeper of Mr. Butch Lewis. And I will go a little bit more into that as the program concludes. But when I first went into his home, I had to be screened. You just didn't get in the home of Mr. Butch Lewis, though I knew very little about him at the time. But I would like to say this to you. He was rough, he was tough, And I heard someone say last week he was kind of, you know, like rough behind the edges, but that interior of that heart was something else.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Savannah had said she would talk to him about me. I didn't meet him at first because he would be gone, or he would even be in the home. But the home was like, his bedroom was, his home was so, and I'm not going into personal things, but the house was so huge. And I learned how to make those, I guess that's why I like sparkles now. He wanted his home to sparkle. And I was telling Savannah the other day, the foyer alone was like, it's like you're going ice skating. And they wanted things the way they wanted them. And to get into Mr. Lewis's home, I did the wash, I did it all. And I went in a little slow. Savannah would tell me, you're slow, but you're thorough. Yeah. But in learning to work for Mr. Butch Lewis, who was a perfectionist, he was very articulate, you had to learn to be thorough, but yet you had to pick up the pace. Yeah. And from that home, leaving that home in time, I began to take on jobs that gave me the experience from working in Mr. Lewis's home, the pace. I went to Tower Hill as a supervisor, and then I worked at Greenfield, the country club, and other jobs, and we have a home-owned business now that we do. All of that I learned from being in the home of Mr. Butch Lewis. And at that time, and I'm going to conclude this because I could go on, he had the boxers live in the home with him. I got to meet Mr. Mike Spinks, all the boxers, because at that time, Mr. Lewis wanted to make sure his boxers ate right, exercised right, you know, they slept right. And I used to hear him on the intercom, you know, and I was saying to one of the boxers, why are they jumping like that? And one of them said, because he's their bread and butter.
Absolutely.
They totally respected this man. Even though he was rough and tough, that's what made them.
Absolutely.
And this is what is like me now, and nobody can steal my will, because when you're around people such as this in Savannah, you did it. They taught you what they wanted, and you did it.
And Marva, you had mentioned a very important part. I can remember when I used to go to the boxing matches down in Atlantic City. When Butch came in, he had such an air of professionalism that he would just, and they would be ready to assist at whatever his needs are. And you know, I had even mentioned this to Mike Spinks on last Wednesday, that I'm so happy that he stayed with Butch, because had he not, he might have ended up like Tyson and some of the others. But Butch was a perfect manager. And not only was he a good manager, he lived the life and commanded the respect of all of those in his presence. And you can tell what a great manager that he was. Look at the vast assets, his history in the motion picture. You know, when we were colored with Tim Reed. And I believe that possibly Tim Reed wasn't here because, you know, down in Winston-Salem, now they're having the African American Film Festival. And a lot of them, Denzel and several others, when they left here on Monday evening, they went down there because of different movies that they have. Also, his venture into the music business. So he had vast assets into a lot of arenas. And here, with our political arena, which has supported many of the politicians that we have in office today. And again, I say, you don't hear a lot, because Butch isn't like a lot of people that we all know that are boastful. Butch was never boastful. Prideful, but not boastful. And what Butch did for you, he did it from the heart. And he didn't need to hear his name mentioned every time he contributed, and, you know, Jack, to an organization.
I like to also say, I didn't meet him at first, but then when I met him, Savannah told me, she told him, when you meet her, you'll meet her with no shoes on. Well, when I got to work, and I can't deal with shoes on in a home, so he met me with no shoes on. And, you know, but I would like to say to you how important it is to be trusted. You had to be screened or whatever to get into the home, but when you got into the home, you weren't treated like, you know, you were treated like family.
That's right.
We would talk, me and Savannah got very, very close, and you know, I saw Butch from time, Mr. Lewis from time to time, but it was nice to be trusted. I learned how to do so many things, and one thing, you know, when I would wash his clothes, the monies would float from out of them pants, Jackie. And I said, you know, it wasn't, some people would say, like, if you're on a job, maybe they're testing you. No, you already came. When you got in the house, you were already in. It's just that, you know, like some people test you, well, like I said, to see if you're going to take this. It wasn't that way with him. Again, I want to say, when you got screened and he accepted you,
Absolutely.
the trust came with it.
Absolutely.
So the monies would wash up. It tickles me when I think of it. I would always take the monies and let them dry, because they went through the cycle of washing. So after they washed up, I would take them and always lay them to dry out, you know. But it was so let me say this in saying all of this. And so we're going to go on to you and keep it rolling.
Yeah.
They made me feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
Comfortable means a lot to me. Some people, you know, you just can't seem to get it, and they're so up here and so where. They made me feel like I was one of the family. They made me feel real comfortable, and it was just such an honor to be a part of the Mr. Butch Lewis home.
And I think Savannah will get a joy out of this. Savannah, you remember that yellow Bentley that Mr. Lewis had? When he would pull up in Southbridge in the yellow Bentley, all the kids would want to gather and look at the car. But us adults would say, well, don't get too close because we don't want you to scratch it.
Yeah.
Yellow Bentley.
Yes.
Butch would say, let them get close and look at the car, because I'm going to tell them that they don't have to grow up to sell drugs in order to have a car like this.
Yes.
And he would start talking about education.
Yes.
Savannah, I know you know that's a true